Hi, welcome. A warm good morning to each of you. Thanks for making it here into this beautiful space where we come together to talk about peace from a couple of different angles and hear from a number of individuals that have lots of opinions about peace and how we achieve just peace and sustain just peace and how we utilize the multilateral system, our faith communities, our individual beliefs, all together in order to achieve and sustain just peace throughout the world. I'm Casey Harden. I'm the CEO General Secretary of the Worldwide WCA. That's a W, not an M. We are an incredible movement of women that's almost 200 years old, and it's women from communities all over the world who, before the 1980s, really came together what we would call now through grassroots organizing. How do we come together with grassroots organizing? We come together because we share principles and values typically, and then we decide we want to take action. And that's been the work of the YWCA, like I said, for almost 2 centuries. And it is with that expertise of women from all around the world that we are part of many of the sponsors of this event, and also how we show up at UNCSW. We show up not for performative speeches, but instead to try our best, the 100 of us that show up, for instance, this year, to speak with and on behalf of our colleagues all around the world. And one thing that we know at the YWCA is that for almost 200 years, when women of the YWCA get together every 4 years, unfortunately, issues of violence and war and conflict are always relevant. There's never, ever been a point in time when it hasn't been number one for the collective women of a global movement. So in that, we know that we're in a really unique time to be having this discussion. It's always relevant, but there are times that I would say we reach kind of a fever pitch of relevance. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today. I've been asked to cover a couple of housekeeping items. One is, please no photos. The sponsors of the event are asking for no photos to be taken. We have Simon in the back, who is a wonderful photographer. He will be capturing moments that we have together today and providing those photos to the organizers, and they will use those photos in accordance with what you learned about when you registered for the event. So we're going to have, what's today going to look like? We're going to have opening remarks. We'll have a panel, and then we'll have 3 responses from the audience. We have a timekeeper up front who has the hardest job in the room. Second to the individuals that have to try to see her green and red and yellow signs in order to manage ourselves, because this is something that no doubt everyone that speaks today is really passionate about. So I'd like to start by introducing Ambassador for Gender Equality for Finland, Katri Viinikka. And the ambassador holds the position for gender equality at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs for Finland since September 1st, 2018. Before that, she was Ambassador of Finland to the Kingdom of the Netherlands and permanent representative of Finland to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. I could go on and read all of her expertise and experience that she brings, but I'm sure you'll be able to feel it and sense it as she shares with us. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Madam Vice Minister, Excellencies, dear participants, a warm welcome to this side event co-organized by a number of faith-based CSOs and co-sponsored by the governments of Colombia, Finland and Norway. It's a great pleasure for me to deliver these opening remarks on behalf of Finland. This year we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. And that is certainly a unique opportunity for the international community to reaffirm its commitment to the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and maybe even more importantly, to its implementation. Women and girls are disproportionately affected by the crises and conflicts of today's world. Be it in the Middle East, in Ukraine, or in Sudan, entire generations of women and girls have been pushed backwards. However, women must not be seen merely as victims of conflict, but first and foremost as agents of change. But unfortunately, women remain significantly underrepresented in peace processes as negotiators, mediators, witnesses, observers, or signatories to peace accords. Furthermore, peace agreements often lack adequate gender-specific provisions. We also know that if women are not included from the very beginning of the process, it's difficult to change the course later on. Dear friends, Finland is currently implementing its 4th National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. Our main objective is to strengthen the leadership and meaningful participation of women in all their diversity. For example, we want to enhance consideration for women with disabilities in peace processes. One concrete way of contributing to the WPS agenda has been Finland's long-term support to various networks of women mediators, which has made visible women's leadership and expertise in mediation. It has allowed for peer learning and exchanging of best practices across the globe. For instance, through the Global Alliance of Regional Women Mediator Networks. And Finland has also co-funded gender and inclusive mediation strategies training for mediators together with Norway. And the next training will take place in Finland this April. Dear friends, faith-based actors, including, of course, women, can have a significant role also in the post-conflict work. Faith can divide communities, but if its positive impact is nurtured, its unifying power may be great. Religious and faith-based actors are often highly respected in their communities, and they can use their moral authority for the common good. Women religious leaders can also be very courageous, for instance, when they decide to speak up for human rights, as we have actually seen quite recently in this country. I wish you very fruitful discussions today and every success in your hugely important work to promote a just, sustainable, and inclusive peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. So when I look out across the crowd today, I see a lot of black clothing. I don't know whether it's intentional or not. Yes, okay. So for those that are nodding, World Council of Churches many years ago started us all on a solidarity campaign, Thursdays in Black, in order to symbolically wear black, addressing, acknowledging, and really saying we honor those that have been on the harsh side of rape, violence, and war. And we wear black to acknowledge it and to each week essentially restate our intention to keep addressing the issue until that scourge has been eradicated. If you aren't wearing black, that's okay. We invite you to do that henceforth. So we're going to move into the panel. I'm going to introduce the panelists one by one. I've been told to use one sentence from their bio to introduce them, so I've done my best. So first we'll start with Reverend Sally Azar from Palestine, who I very much admire. Our paths have crossed for a number of years now, and we've even spent late nights talking about women in peace and institutions versus individuals. Sally, I'm looking for Sally, you're an ordained pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land, and you're the first female Palestinian pastor, which is no small thing. So please join us. That is some great love. Let's give it to every panelist. Can you imagine if everyone gets that? All right, let's do it. Okay. So next, Yordanos Aznaki from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Yordanos is a gender activist currently working as the gender division head at the Ethiopian Orthodox Church Development and Interchurch Aid Commission. She leads projects advocating for women's rights, fighting gender-based violence, and preventing harmful traditional practices. So let's do it again. Now we have Aziza Malim from the Finn Church Aid Kenya. Aziza is a regional peace-building advisor with Finn Church Aid Kenya Country Office. She coordinates peace projects and supports Joint Initiative for Strategic Religious Action Program, and that's across 7 countries: Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Mali, Iraq, and Indonesia. There she is. And last but certainly not least is Ivy Koek. She's a representative to the UN for Soka Gakkai International, based in New York, and a focal point for gender equality and women's empowerment. She provides leadership to gender justice, sustainability and climate change, peace, disarmament, and human rights, mainly through non-formal education, which is no small task. Okay, can you still hear me? Yes, I'm getting yeses. Okay, the hardest part for me this morning will be that I've been told the questions I'm to ask, and we've been told to stick to our script. So we will do so, we think. We'll see. Rachel may have to come grab the mic from us. All right, so I'm going to ask you each a question, and you'll have a glorious 5 minutes to shed light on the issue. We're going to start with you, Sally. Why are local actors, especially women, crucial agents for positive change and peace?
Well, as I come from Palestine and being a pastor there, I always say that if more women would are taking the lead, then there would be so much more change happening. And especially in my congregation, I've always grown up where the women have been always the ones who get the people together. They are the ones who actually do the work that most of the churches are doing, yet they don't get the acknowledgement that they should. However, I think it's changing, at least in our church, and through our gender justice ministry, and our director is also sitting here, who has done amazing work, and it wouldn't have been possible that I would be ordained without her work that was there paving the way for having the ordination. So all of that, it all matters. All the work is not as easy to do, and it needs to be in cooperation with the churches and in cooperation with the congregations and so on. And believe it or not, most of the people that have been against women ordination in our churches were women. So it was mostly discussing and understanding why actually they have rights, and why actually they are also equal to everyone else, and that women can also become pastors and can become leaders in churches. And still, there are so many that it's not like 100% in our churches. There are still maybe 10, 15% that are still against women ordination, yet that all the positives always overshadows these little things. But it matters because it's all about all these different processes that we have to go through in order to get to where we are today. And I think women are like they are the ones who who are able to talk to each other. There are so many organizations. Even our church, we have a lot of, especially being located in Jerusalem. And mostly they would tell us, oh, but Jerusalem, oh, it's not Palestine. However, our churches are all Palestinians. We have 6 congregations, and we're all, and I think it's just important to say, because a lot of people don't even know that we are Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land, in Palestine, and people usually forget about that, or they don't think about Christians when we talk about Palestine. So, however, this is the one thing that we can say, that we ecumenically, as also ecumenical women, we have so many things and organizations what brings us together, and what strengthens us. And even as women, when we come together, and last week we had the World Day of Prayer, and a lot of women came together, and it was such a strong statement that ecumenically we can always come together. And so many women always come to me from different churches and tell me, oh, that's great that you have that you have a gender justice policy in your church, that you are ordained in your church, that you are able to take that road. We hope to have that too, but most of them tell us, we know that it's not going to happen in our lifetime, you know? So most of them don't even have hope in their churches that that changes. And some of them come and tell us, especially also a lot of men, in our context, they come and tell us, yeah, but we have women in our churches. I was like, yeah, of course you have women in your churches. And they're like, yeah, but they also do a lot of work. I was like, nobody neglects that, but are they leading in anything? They're like, no. So whenever I asked, even for any kind of event, okay, can you please suggest one woman that we can talk to from the church? We don't want to talk to male pastors. And it's always no responses. And it's always difficult, or some of them do respond. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm not generalizing. Of course, there's some who do. However, it's very difficult. And yet, I know that even the Orthodox Church, isn't it right, that they took that gender justice policy from our church, or they have also gender justice in their churches, that because they see that this can or should be changed. And I think this is like one way to see how we as a Lutheran church are having so many things being changed in our context, and even other churches are taking it on and learning from it, especially also the Anglican Church. So there's so many things that while working together, it paves the way to see that, okay, it starts with having equality between men and women, especially these days, because we still don't have it. And even now, it's needed more than ever. And for me, I mean, of course, it's beautiful to have so much support, and I'm really appreciating these spaces here to have so much women support, because that's not always existent, especially in our context. We have just small spaces of that, and sometimes me being an only woman between 8 male pastors is not easy. And I think I think a lot of us know that. A lot of us know that working in a patriarchal society, working between men sometimes fighting and telling that your feelings matter and what you say matters, it does. And because it's not always like that. And just for each woman who needs that, it's there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. It always strikes me when you talk about some of the unexpected resistance that you experience, particularly from women during your journey. And I think that those unexpected pieces are really relevant to the conversation we're having today. When I was studying in undergraduate, I was a women's studies major with a reproductive health minor, with the idea that I was going to work in reproductive justice. And one of my biggest aha moments of a student of reproductive biology was that how our hormones, our endocrine system, and all our systems work together independently, and that hormones are actually fluctuating for men and women all day long in the most outrageous ways. But typically, they're going this way or they're going that way, but it's kind of like this. And why am I even telling you this story? It's because one of the things we want to talk about today is understanding human rights as universal, interrelated, interdependent, indivisible, and mutually reinforcing, including freedom of religion or belief, because that's so connected to other fundamental rights. With that, Jordanos, you have a difficult question to tell us. With that context, how do cultural and religious beliefs shape attitudes toward gender equality in women's rights in peace-building initiatives?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in this vital topic. Yes, it's true. Culture and religious belief really have a significant role in the attitude towards gender equality, mainly in the peace initiative. They really affect the behavior, the social norms, and also the effectiveness of the effort that we are putting in a peace building initiative. When we talk about culture and religious belief, I just want to quote some 5-6 major points. The first one is the cultural norms and the gender role. You know, in every society there are these deep-rooted gender roles that are given for women and men, and mostly this role put men in the leadership position, in the higher leadership position, and forget the contribution of women in the peace building. For example, in Ethiopia, in 2022, recently there was the Pretoria Agreement to cease fire in the Tigray conflict. So in this negotiation, there was different parties, including AUR participated, but in that table there is no woman, 0 women. So this shows that how women are excluded from different peace initiative and peace negotiation. The other one is the religious belief. I don't personally believe that religion by itself have an impact, but the most important problem is the interpretation that we did in the text. So we need to be very careful how we are interpreting this text. We might either support the gender equality and the women right, or we might distort the existing right even further. So we need to be very careful. The third and the most important point that I just want to mention is the community influence. You know how the role of community leaders and the religious figures matter. So we have to use these figures as a gender champion so that they can help us in shifting the attitude of the community and the social norms toward this the role of women to participate in different peace building initiatives. The other one, the most important thing that I want to emphasize is the Women Empowerment Initiative. There are lots of initiatives that we are designing, but we need to be very sensitive, and they have to be more towards their culture and religious belief. Otherwise, if we are tends to value the culture and the religion, there is a capacity for them to be more successful. And also, I just want to emphasize, whenever we do the empowerment initiative for the women, we need to include this education, leadership, and also economic empowerment in that, so that we can able to change the norms of the society towards women peace building participation. The last it's not the last, but the intersectionality, which I want to emphasize. You know, whenever we think about gender, we need to check it from different intersectionality points. For example, it might be ethnicity, it might be culture, it might be religion. So women are not homogeneous group. They come from different background, and they have different challenges that affect them in their participation to peace building initiatives. So we need to design a tailored approach in this regard in order to address and also check their, in order to address and also recognize the challenge they are facing regarding their contribution to peace building. The other very important thing is the engagement of men and boys. We need to engage them. They have to be an ally. They have to be a supportive environment for the women in peace building initiative. In this regard, we have to design different engagement and dialogue parties with cultural and religious group. The last and the most important thing is resistance to change. We know that religious and cultural beliefs are sometimes there may be resistance. So whenever this resistance happens, we have to be very careful how to handle this resistance. There must be, this resistance might be from the fear of distorting the existing cultural norms or the religious structure, but we have to be very respectful, very sensitive, and very tailored approach has to be there so that the woman can be involved in the peace building. So in general, I think we need to integrate the cultural and the religious belief in any peace building initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordanis. I couldn't agree with you more. At YWCA, we have a 5-year initiative, and it was designed by women, especially young women in community. We've got lots of partners, and the idea is how do you nurture and sustain collaboration between formal faith actors, young women, grassroots women's rights organizations, and those that actually can be really influential around issues of law. And we tried it on for size, and we're in year 5, and everything you've said aligns completely. And a challenge is how do we package that up and make it something that is replicated? For the YWCA, it's also kind of our nod to Resolution 1325, which is really important, but I kind of feel like has been sidelined over the last few years compared to, say, I don't know, I would say for the last few years. I'll leave it at that. So Ivy, tell us, get us all re-inspired about the significance and impact of Resolution 1325.
So actually, I'm gonna throw something on you. So yes, I want to talk about Security Council Resolution 1325, but there was a precursor a year before, which is very much connected to the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, which was, and I wonder how many of you in this room, and please, a show of hands, if you know that there is a GA resolution on the Declaration and Program of Action on the Culture of Peace, on a culture of peace. So did you know that there's a resolution on a culture of peace at the UN? Did anyone know about that? Very few of you. So yes, and this happened, it just marked 25 years last year. And then about a year later, and that was in September, about a year later in October, 1325 was adopted. So I think that for me and for SGI particularly, we cannot look at 1325 without seeing culture of peace. Yeah, and I think that for a faith actor, you know, our tradition, we're a Buddhist lay organization, global, with around 12 million or so members. And I think that for us, you know, that seems like the most sustainable and, I mean, the most difficult work because we're working on ourselves. But that if we really want to think about long-range peace, active peace, then we need to talk about changing this culture of war to culture of peace. And so 1325 and all its successes, I think, you know, that it's hand in hand. What I can say is women's leadership, women, you know, in positions of power, that was highlighted. And I think that, I mean, it's phenomenal. Like 25 years, I think anyone who knows about 1325, you know, like they just worship it because it was a huge landmark. It was a breakthrough. Yeah, and it's a Security Council resolution that has significant weight compared to, I mean, it's, I don't want to compare, it's different, but you know, it's very different, and as we all know, Security Council has its issues, speaking honestly, but definitely it has teeth, and so much has been done around national action plans around the world, and so it's raised the bar and expectation and for all countries to try to meet this agenda. Of course, there are still many that do not have national action plans, but I think the fact that we have this, what I want to focus on more, though, because I'm here at the UN as a representative of SGI, my other hat is, I cannot not talk about that because it takes so much of my time. I'm also the co-chair of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women of New York. And I would say that we have to talk about reigniting civil society's engagement on 1325. Because there's been a stalemate or stagnation or something there the last 10 years. And so the committee did form a working group on peace and gender equality. And the idea is, so it's been 26 years since the topic of women and armed conflict, which is one of the critical areas, that's one of the 12 critical areas of Beijing Platform, was last addressed by CSW 26 years ago. We know since then, like I said, this year is 25 years of 1325, that we have the Security Council resolution. And so there are lots of arguments of why we can't discuss it in the CSW. However, for women and girls, this is a topic that we can't avoid talking about this. And I don't think it's a either or. I think what we're doing by bringing this conversation and really voicing the need to talk about this is that we are strengthening 1325. And even more, we are reactivating a movement of us, of civil society, to know what it is. I mean, October versus March in UN is completely different. I mean, this is the second largest convening at the United Nations, CSW. October, during 1325 anniversary month, an open debate, you don't see that many people there. It's a very small clique of people, and what we need is everyone engaged. Because if we're going to hold, countries accountable, we need everyone to know about 1325. So, and ultimately, then we are building a culture of peace. So that's my whole thing. I hope I covered.
Yeah, it was beautiful, Ivy. Thank you. And you have done my job for me and created a terrific transition to Aziza and the question she'll be exploring for us, which is, what can countries do at a national level to support the implementation of 1325 resolution, and how can faith-based actors advance this?
And I think, thank you, Casey. And I think Ivy's sort of like wrapped up and responded to my question. But looking at, beginning by looking at the member states and the advancement of United Nations Security Council 1325, implementation through the National Action Plan, and just to mention that only a third of the UN members have adopted the National Action Plan. So a lot of work needs to be done there to advocate for, the adoption of the National Action Plans in the countries that have not yet done this. And as Ivy has already said, that then is a vehicle to really push for 1325 and women's role in peace and security. But going back to the National Action Plans, and I'd want to look at really the point of contextualizing these National Action Plans at the country level, keeping in mind the local needs, the problems, what works for Somalia, and what peace and security means in the context of Somalia is very different from what it means in Kenya. In Somalia, the role of women in peace and security is through the local governance structures as they're in the process of reconstruction. In Central African Republic, it would mean social cohesion. So really looking at ways to contextualize our national action plans, looking at the role of religious and traditional leaders within those spaces, and looking at the traditional conflict resolution mechanisms that work more or better in some countries than in others, and really looking at how to now then incorporate that into our national action plans. I think is very important, the element of religion and cultural dynamics as we discuss. And oftentimes you'd find that these national action plans are frameworks that are used at the State Department level, the Ministry of Gender level, and really not brought down into the communities. The communities do not understand what the National Action Plan is about, how to often use the tool. It's not locally owned, and that means there's less implementation at the grassroots level. So really to open up those frameworks and structures so that the localization process of the National Action Plans are done in a way that they incorporate the voices of, it's the bottom up, as well as strengthening the linkages between the governments and the robust informal peace structures, which are very important for advancing the role of women in peace and security. Also looking at the national action plans and aligning that to the gender policies and the security sector reform, and looking at the context-specific, again, context-specific nature of the country that is implementing the National Action Plan. You'd find that whenever the countries are implementing and reviewing their National Action Plans, they should consider, oftentimes, the nuances, like now we're talking about the role of women in climate adaptation, we're talking about issues of FGM, and really how to conflict, women affected by conflict, and looking at how to then tighten that into the National Action Plan. So always revising and revisiting that, using the data that is available, providing technical backstopping. We want women to engage in mediation, yet women are not trained and given those capacities to engage in mediation and conflict reconciliation processes. I'd also want to emphasize on financing. We've talked about it, we keep talking about it, financing and providing opportunities for women grassroots, as well as technical backstopping for them to really engage in these grassroots efforts to enhance and ensure the national action plans are underway. I'd like to also focus on, now that most of these conflicts are not within the countries, we have cross-border conflicts, we have regional instability, opening up these national action plans in a way that then they not only speak to the women within our, our countries. For example, like the conflict in South Sudan affects the conflict in Kenya and in Somalia and in Ethiopia, and really looking at that regional perspective that it gives. An example I would give of a project that has successfully been implemented by the government of Finland and Kenya to fight SGBV, and it was a long-term 5-year program actually bringing the moral and legal duty bearers as well as the grassroots engagement and the communities at the grassroots level. So really looking at women, peace and security and the role that the regional and the AU, the IGAD, and other countries can play in shaping the role of women in peace and security. I mentioned coordination, whole of society approach, engaging faith actors, and going to the question now of faith actors. I mean, it's been mentioned here that faith actors have a unique role to play. They're part of the community. They are the first respondents. The communities rely on faith actors for inspiration, to draw inspiration, for trauma healing. We would run to the faith actors first. They're great at, they have a convening power. They are part of the community. They, oftentimes during conflict when people cannot reach, even civil society organizations cannot reach the communities, it's the faith actors that are present. So really, they have a great role in enhancing the visibility, changing the perceptions and attitudes, and rallying for women peace and security role. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Sally Giordano, Saziza Ivy, I've been told we have a little bit of time that we didn't know we had. So I'm going to ask you to each take a moment, and I'll talk to everyone here while you think. And consider if you were Queen, Czar, President, elected Prime Minister, head of a UN department, co-leader of your community organizing party, fill in the blank. What you would do, and you'll have 1 minute each, what you would do to advance women's role in peace and security. So I want to give you time to think, and you'll have about 30 seconds while I share a bit with the audience. Okay. You know what I would do? and it builds a bit on what Aziza said, is you may not know that less than 1% of funding goes to women's rights organizations, goes to any formal effort, whether it's grassroots or even formal, of women coming together, organizing together. They get less than 1% of funding from around the globe. So were I the lever puller, the Wizard of Oz for the day, I would most certainly, once and for all, get far more resources in the hands of women and community to do what they know needs to be done. So that's what I would do. Now we're going to pass the mic and hear what you would do in about a minute each.
Well, first of all, I will start by letting everyone have equal rights, because that's something that I don't have personally, and we don't have justice. So in order to get to peace, there is equal rights, justice missing. So we'll never get there until we have that. And first of all, end of occupation, and the end of the wall, and all the checkpoints that we have to go through. And definitely, I would invest more in the educational systems that, in order to enable more women and girls to grow up in healthy environments. Everyone else, not only women and girls, but also men and boys and all of them, because it is exactly that is needed. And if you all know, like right now, well, in Gaza, the first respondents are always women towards the whole war that is ongoing, and they are the ones that are continuing at the education within shattered houses. They continue teaching their children, and they continue to show them what education is, because they don't want them to miss out on their education within all the traumas that they all go through. And they shouldn't go through all of that. But there needs to be more spaces to have to even process all of that. But in order to process things need to end first. And that's why I came here. It was very difficult for me just hearing the word peace, because it's not realistic. It's not realistic to talk about peace when all of this is still ongoing, and we cannot get there until everything, until we have a free Palestine, basically.
Thank you. I think what I'm going to do is I just want to change the cultural norms that really affects women from participating in peace building initiative. And I just want to dismantle all the systematic barrier that affects women from engaging in different peace and negotiation and agreements. And also I work in educating women and girls, because I believe that education is the most important thing for women, for our sustainable development, and also for them to engage in peace role and gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you. I think for me would be breaking the silos, looking at aspects of religion and culture, and within those spaces that promote and enhance the meaningful participation of women in peace and security. I had the privilege of learning from, the Indonesia perspective, and how the women of Indonesia actually use religion to advance their role within the women ulama, which for me, as a Muslim, was strange that, oh, you actually have women Islamic scholars. Like, is that even possible? But it's the same religious, values and tenets, and what makes it possible for them to engage in issues peace and security, looking at the role of women in PCVE, which is an issue for me, and especially in the region of where I come from. So really looking at peer-to-peer learning within the spaces of religion and culture. What did the women in Somalia do? What did the women in Sudan do? What did the women in Mozambique do? What worked? And really discussing those, because if we don't do that, then we tend to sit back and say that religion does not allow. What are the misconceptions around that? looking introspectively into the religious scriptures and not waiting for the men to sort of like narrate this and tell us what can be done and what cannot be done. So I think for me is using those religion as a tool, and also breaking down the misconception around culture to advance the role of women in peace and security.
The question again is how I would advance women's peace and security, right? And queen of the world, or I'm aiming high. Queen of the universe. No, I think that, yeah, first I would start with abolishing nuclear weapons. Absolutely no need, and that wasted money can go to education, girls, women, and so I think that I really focus on that, and then mandating that everyone, all genders, will have have a human rights education curriculum. They'll learn about gender equality. Yeah, I think if we have that gender justice, we should be right aiming towards the direction of peace. I hope, and breaking down the patriarchal system that we're living in now. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So thank you, Sally. Thank you, Jordanos. Thank you, Aziza. Thank you, Ivy, for all of your sharing. We will take this away. And we also will get to hear from 3 of you in the audience that will respond to what you've heard today. And then there'll be a closing speaker. Okay, so our first respondent is Sitzel Blekken, Ambassador for Women's Rights and Gender Equality from Norway. Thank you.
Thank you. And first of all, let me thank the panelists for your insights and sharing your experiences and being role models, being brave in difficult situations, and also your role in breaking down the patriarchal structures and changing the cultural norms. I think you have touched upon a number of very, very important areas. And so I think it's encouraging for all of us to see and to understand and to think that it's actually possible. Because in the picture we see today, it's rather bleak. And we are, easy for us to get depressed and say, nothing works and always going in the wrong direction. So we need to stand together and be strong and fight against all this patriarchal structures and the lack of funding and not the least the war that we see. So I think, we're all horrified about the consequences of war and how that looks and how that affects the civilians and not the least the women. So, and then, of course, it's also so important to focus on the 1325. The question was, is it sidelined during the last few years? Maybe. I do not really have that feeling. And I think for Norway, the 1325 has been very, very important. It was one of our main priorities when we were member of the Security Council a couple of years back. And I think we need it even more than ever. And Norway fully stands behind it. Yeah, and I think we are very many that support meaningful participation of women, peace and security matters, and also the faith-based actors, as we have heard today. They can have an access to spaces in society that other groups cannot. And inclusion of faith-based actors in conflict prevention or peace-building processes is a key to a more lasting and peaceful effect. And we also have seen in conflicts that sometimes there is interreligious violence, and religion is very often used as, in conflicts not necessarily that it's not, I wouldn't say it's not religious conflicts, but it's used because it's so easy to mobilize people on the ground on religion. It's more about, the fight about power and power structures and patriarchal structures as well, but religion is so easy to use to mobilize and, feelings. So I think that's very important for us to keep in mind when we're discussing this, that it's normally it's not about religion, but religion is used as a tool. But then in these conflicts where interreligious violence is a deliberate factor, women are often targeted for specific violations, not only due to their gender and reproductive abilities, but also because of their religious identity. And examples of using rape or sexual assault to control another religious group's demography in conflicts are plenty. So it's so important then also today about what we have discussed about this, interreligious, ecumenical cooperation, and to learn to speak to each other and to respect each other and respect each other's religions. Norway has a long tradition in facilitating peace processes and mediation when we are invited parties to, when we are invited by the parties in conflicts to do so. And we have noticed overall that there is, as been mentioned here today as well, there's a lack of space for women in these mediations. And cultural norms quite often limit women's ability or, being included, and we need to continue to fight that. And how can we do that? And how can faith-based organizations play a role in that? Because women are strategic, experienced peacemakers, and research also shows that inclusive processes lead to more sustainable outcomes. And studies tell us that frontline organizations, women-led, they can de-escalate the tension between communities and avoid full-fledged conflicts. Local organizations, and also, I think what has been mentioned here earlier, the localization of national action plans are important in that respect. Norway has had a national action plan since 2006. We're also supporting a number of other countries in preparing and implementing their national action plans. And there's been discussions today about funding, and I think throughout the whole week we have heard that, funding is lacking, funding is a challenge, funding is, and it hurts me to say we are in a situation where we will continue to face this challenge when it comes to funding. There's no way we can, the landscape has changed. We need to find better ways to work together, to be smarter, to be more efficient, to cooperate better, to utilize the resources that are there, and for you civil society organizations, stand up and ask for more funding still, but be prepared that the landscape has changed. So I think I'll just close with that and saying that we and the 1325 agenda are stronger together. Keep up the good work.
Ambassador, I would agree with you that Norway is a huge cheerleader for 1325. In fact, years ago, when I was visiting some of the government offices, there was posters and people had it on their business cards that were handed out. And it was a really exciting environment to be in. You ended with funding. For those in the room, our YWCA movement leaders consider Norway, the women's rights organizations consider Norway to be a big friend and actually a nation that very much focuses and prioritizes putting money directly in the hands of women leaders. So thank you. Yep. We need to get everyone else to follow your modeling. Yeah. The next respondent is Dr. Amrita Kapoor, Secretary General for Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in Australia.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation to speak, and also echoing the absolute endorsement of Norway's pioneering and commitment, including funding and supporting in co-collaborative ways of navigating all of the challenges today when it comes to women, peace and security. So one of the reasons I was really drawn to attend today and feel particularly honoured to be able to engage in this conversation is that WILF was founded 110 years ago, and one of the founders was a Quaker, and one of the important I think, aspects of that thread is around how do we find complementary ways of working across all institutions and spheres within different types of communities. And I think the reason this is particularly valuable is from what I heard from all of the speakers, and I'll speak to the three sort of different tiers, from worst to potentially best. The first one is where we are today in terms of gender backlash, where we see, and this was just mentioned, the instrumentalization of religion in really quite concerning ways, because it is intersecting with other different types of systems and forces of oppression. And so it's gaining a lot more traction now than we might have expected. And I think this is where faith-based leaders who are committed to gender equality are actually best able to counter this instrumentalization from within, because it requires a counter narrative. It requires a wellspring or a movement within these types of organizations and communities to say that this is not the only narrative that we need to follow. And in fact, you know, feminist leaders outside faith-based organizations, those same words and messages don't have the same impact as within the community. And this is something which I think all of the speakers referenced. So here, I think for gender backlash, this is where the feminist community needs to be very strategic in its complementarity. And this is where having gender equality advocates, and I would say both men and women within faith-based communities, is critical. And this goes to that point around engaging men and boys. It's the second point, which is around navigating resistance and cultivating solidarity. What I heard from all of the speakers was this importance of belonging to community, of being able to find this balance between the navigating of resistance within that community and then taking on a leadership role that actually serves as part of the dismantling of barriers to other women in that same community. And I think this is really important because it's around how do we find ways and dialogues within faith-based communities that allow inclusion and equality to emerge and then to be nurtured. And in this case, I think, again, it was mentioned around how faith-based actors are often first responders, they're conveners, they perform outreach, early detection, and for all of those reasons, this is the complementary aspect to all of the other types of advocacy messaging that might happen outside of these communities as well. And the third element is around what was just mentioned, which is changing norms. And here, I think I want to return to this idea of counter-narratives and dialogue. So this is where we need to be empowering faith-based leaders who find those entry points to talk about why inclusion matters for the strength of the community, why it's not a win-lose scenario, it's a win-win. And I think this is where the in-depth expertise, the credibility, the legitimacy of belonging to particular communities is what allows these members and these leaders to articulate that approach. It's a counter-narrative that says this is not the only force and the only path on the table. There are other ways that we can be true to our values, be inclusive, and very fundamentally support and promote gender equality. So in terms of returning to the Women, Peace and Security agenda, I've sort of been saying this in multiple events this week, we've really prioritised security at the very top in a very limited, short-sighted, hard security way, which is actually fundamentally self-defeating. We've then tried to add women in certain ways without fundamentally looking at what does this mean to have meaningful participation, to have diverse voices at the table influencing the conversation. And the final element is that we don't have peace. None of these initiatives have actually brought us closer to peace. So we actually need to be doing something quite radically different and saying, well, for example, if we're looking at different sectors of the community, how do we strengthen the voices and the dialogues within those communities along these lines of universal and fundamental values? So it was a real pleasure to hear all of the speakers today and to be able to participate in this type of conversation that we actually need to be cultivating in all sorts of different spheres around the world. Thank you.
Dr. Kapoor, if I was queen for the day, Dr. Kapoor, if I were queen for the day, I would ask you to put that into a blog, and we will all hashtag it and push it out, yeah? Okay, all right, and I think I might have agreement. Okay. Our last respondent is Tatiana Jitvaneva, who is UN Women's Policy Specialist on Peace Building and Sustaining Peace.
Thank you so much, and it's wonderful to be here on behalf of UN Women and finally talk about some positive views on this world. We see a grim picture every day in the news when we open our phones, when we look at the other sources of information. But what we really want is we want to see peace. And in UN Women, in the unit where I work, we support the Secretary General to develop annual reports on women, peace and security, to track the progress of implementation. And yes, it goes up and down in many different directions, depending on the year, depending on the topic. But what we are really intentionally trying to do in the UN system is to focus on peace. In our analysis, to really focus on gender analysis, to focus on inclusive analysis, really unpack the different levels of conflict and peace. But while the rest of the system is focusing on conflict analysis, we are and looking for conflict drivers and etc. We are looking at the opportunities for peace and drivers of peace and drivers of change. And those actors for peace are mainly represented at the community level. So the stories of organizations and examples that were mentioned today, they resonate very deeply with the core mandate of UN Women. And as you all know, this year we are commemorating the Beijing Platform for Action, which is turning 30 years. And it was already mentioned, the 25 years of 1325. And this is also a 10th anniversary of the resolution on youth, peace and security, which is another very important tool that we are using to promote community engagement and inclusivity and the focus on equality. I also want to mention Resolution 1889, which was adopted in October of 2009, which is specifically looking at the role of women in peace building. And I think this is the essential kind of normative framework that is helping us to refocus the political attention, the financing, and the support to locally women's locally led organizations. We know that there are a lot of critical gaps in the implementation of agenda, but we also know that there are new threats and new challenges that women peace builders are facing. And in addition to the well-known challenges of women being underrepresented in different decision-making levels, we are also seeing the climate-related security risks. We are seeing the cybersecurity threats, online harm and misuse of artificial intelligence, which in the end is resulting on the security and safety of women peace builders themselves. And also the securitized approaches in many parts of the world are also worrying, and the countermeasure that we see, the amazing role of women peace builders at the community level is helpful. So from our side, we also see women, peace and security as a prevention agenda. And I think the discussion that happened today is a true evidence of how women at the community level are contributing to conflict prevention. And of course, the women's participation requires financing. It was mentioned several times today. If the world is able to allocate $2.4 trillion towards military goals, there must be some room for finding the funding for women's peace-building work on the ground. So far, it's only 5% of bilateral aid that is dedicated to programs with gender equality as a principal objective, and only 0.3% of bilateral aid is going to women's organizations. So there is a critical need of rethinking the investment, rethinking of prioritization, and rethinking of how are we supporting community-led organizations. Traditional religious leaders are the key actors on the ground, and Young Women is working very closely through different programs. But I think that your voice coming at CSW and around October, when the Security Council meets to review the implementation of Women, Peace and Security agenda, is really critical. If women are underrepresented at the track 1 and 2 processes, and we see different numbers every year when we are preparing the report, women peace builders at the community level still hold the fort. They still move the agenda forward. And I want to end by quoting our boss, who just recently presented a report on Beijing Plus 30 and was asked a lot of interesting questions by the press about the pushback against gender equality and women's rights that we're facing currently. And she said that gender equality is not an ideology. It is an accelerator of peace, and it is a human right. So thanks so much for all of your work on the ground. And Young Women will continue to stand with women peace builders. Thanks.
Thank you, Tatiana. UN Women has a tough role. There are a lot of activists that look critically at the work of UN Women, and we all have opinions. So wishing you the best of luck, and I'm sure the rest of the room is as well. But thank you for being here. We're going to have closing remarks from Tamara Ospina, the Vice Minister for Women from Colombia, and then I'll briefly come up for a farewell message. Tamara?
Well, hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. This is it's a very special place to be because we learn from women from other parts of the world that as the women in Colombia have been working towards peace building in very, very hard contexts. I am proud to share with you the experience of the formulation and implementation of the National Action Plan of Women, Peace and Security under UN Security Council Resolution 1325 of 2000, which is the first of its kind in the history of Colombia. This is a debt that the Colombian state had with the movement of women and feminists in Colombia that have been actually resisting war, resisting all kinds of violence, and building peace in the worst conditions you can imagine. So this government, which is the first woman in the history of Colombia, decided to make this effort to build this plan, and now we have to face the big challenge of implementation. We have been doing this also with the support of international community. The cooperation have been very, very important to us, and it will continue to be important to finance the implementation of the plan. Within the internal armed conflict in our country, women have been victims and survivors of multiple forms of violence that have disproportionately affected them, leaving a deep scars on their lives, bodies, histories, and community processes. However, women in their diversity also have been very creative and persistent to face this dynamics of conflict and militarization. But not only in our case, war is related directly with inequality and also with economical interest in our natural resources. So we know in Colombia, and this government knows, that the notion of security, and this is also the voice of the organizations of women in the territories, but this government knows as well that peace, at least in the case of Colombia, peace means inversion on social programs. Peace needs equality. in all cases. In Colombia, the inequality is not only gender inequality, which is very deep, but also we have a very racist, structural racism that we inherited from the colony. Okay, so that's why implementing this plan is very important for us. And I want to just highlight that this plan was worked with women in all the diversity in all the territories of Colombia, and also it has this approach that is intersectional. As I know I don't have any more time to share many other things that I will love to discuss with you, but maybe in other moment we can do it. I don't want to leave without expressing one more time from Colombian government all our solidarity with Palestinian people, and stand up and invite everyone that we have to still stand up with Palestinian people against genocide, and speaking loud that Palestina must be free. This is for all women, children in Palestine.
Thank you, Minister. And you said that this is a really special setting and way that we came together. And I want to thank Finland, Colombia, and Norway for creating the space and making it possible. And also all of the civil society and other organizations that are listed below who came together to create this space. So thank you to everyone. My brief farewell is brief, and it's please, please, please imagine yourself as Queen Wizard of Oz, co-director of the organizing committee, that you actually have within you the ability to do that thing that you think isn't possible, like a just peace in Palestine. We're the ones who are going to do it. That's the way it goes. So be a queen, be a czar, be a co-director, and go forth and let's do what we dream of. Thank you.